Life is killing you. Besides that, you have an online class next week. What about our... Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. But talk to me, you're saying what? Yes, I am. Do you want me? Okay, all right. Okay, so I want us to quickly look at the homework I gave you guys. I want us to start with 5.2, and then we'll go to 5.3 thereafter. 5.2 and then 5.3. What's happening with the furniture there?
I knew she was going to
Okay. Right. Oh, it's too small. Yikes. Wow. No, I understand all your effort. I wonder if I would fit in that.
You get it. That's what you get it. It is just coming in.
All right, let's get going. So, question 5.2. Under the required says, for each of the scenarios below, determine whether the component should be purchased from an external supplier or manufactured internally. Okay? So remember, learning unit 5 is called relevant costing. It's called relevant costing. So here, we're now looking at, based on the information provided, should we produce this ourselves or should we outsource it? All right, should we buy it externally? That's pretty much what we're looking at here in question 5.2. So under the required, it says there, using the given cost criteria only, and note any assumptions that should hold. Okay, so first and foremost, we must just use the information that has been provided. Okay, then secondly, it says, assuming government legislation requires the company to undertake quality inspections and tests costing 62,900 per annum, not included in the expenses above. Okay. Then thirdly, assuming additional labor cannot be recruited and any labor realized will be employed in increasing production of an existing product with a selling price of 101 Rand per unit and the following budgeted manufacturing costs. Okay, right. So let's begin. Bucks and J Ltd produces a component that it uses to manufacture a final product. Okay, so here we're discussing only a component, right? That is used to manufacture a whole product. So it's just a piece, all right, of your final product. The manufacturing costs of the component, okay, so here, these are the costs of the component, are as follows. Okay, there we have it. Direct materials, fixed overheads, total costs, etc, etc. An external supplier has offered to supply the component at a guaranteed price of 55 Rand per unit. Okay, so we're obviously going to be using that to compare to see, should we manufacture this thing or should we just go and buy it? Okay, so number one, determine whether the component should be purchased from an external supplier or manufactured internally. Okay, so they've given us the guaranteed price, all right? Then we say, okay, but then what is the variable cost of manufacturing this component per unit of the component? So we go to that table that they gave us and we say, what are our variable costs? What are our variable costs? And there you can see direct materials, obviously. So that's 15 Rand, 50 cents. And then what else? What else? What else must we add to the variable costs? The cost per unit of this component. Where did we, from the table? Direct materials. Yes, we do need. No, we won't include the. Actually, yes, we will. I thought you were saying the fixed overhead. Sorry. Yes, Nadia, we will include the direct labor, and finally, we will also include the variable overhead, the 10 Rand. Okay, which will give us what? 38 Rand. Okay, so it costs us 38 Rand to produce this component. So are we going to produce it or are we going to go and buy it at 55 Rand? We're going to produce it. Okay, so number one has been answered. It's clearly cheaper for us to cheaper for us to manufacture than to go and buy this component. Okay.
Why is it not included? Okay, I know obviously you included variable cost, but why is it not included in the making of the component?
Because remember, your fixed component or your fixed cost is going to be covered by the selling of the product. So even if it was a yes, because we are considering how much does it cost us to make. Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. So the saving we're making is obviously the 17 Rand, which is highlighted in yellow. I don't think I mentioned that. Sorry. Before we go on. Okay. So then we go to part 2. It says, assuming government legislation requires the company to undertake quality inspections and tests, costing 62,900 per annum, not included in the expenses above. So now we have an additional fixed cost, but this fixed cost is specific to what? The component. If we don't produce this component, then we won't incur this fixed cost. Can you see that? So we have to add in this 62. Why is it plugging that in there? 62, 900. Okay, and then they're saying the other thing is we are basically saying, okay, remember again, fixed costs, like I said just now, actually, we know that fixed costs are covered by the sales, isn't it? We are going to incur these fixed costs as a result of producing this component. So we need to ask ourselves, okay, for us to cover this fixed cost, we then need to figure out how many components we need to basically sell. But we are not selling this component in and of itself. Does it make sense? So we need to say, okay, what is the saving that we obviously incur or experience as a result of manufacturing it ourselves, as opposed to buying it? Does that make sense? So we use that almost like an income because we're saying we are actually gaining by manufacturing it ourselves, as opposed to going out and buying it. So we take our formula, usually we would say fixed costs divided by your selling price minus your variable cost, isn't it? But now we're not selling this component, so we'll be basically using our saving, all right, which we know to be the 17 rand, isn't it? So we're then going to say, okay, this fixed cost of 62,900 divided by 17 rand gives us what? So this, we know that break even, this is the break even in units, isn't it? So this is 3,700 units of the component, right? So basically, what are we saying here? We're saying if we are going to utilize 3,700 units or more, then we must manufacture the component, okay? If, however, we are going to use less than 3,700 units, then we should not produce it ourselves or manufacture it ourselves. We should go and buy it, because we will not be able to cover our fixed cost. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, this is one of those. If you've never done the exercise, you'll be stuck over here to say, what am I supposed to do next? Okay, but does it make sense?
With the like formula, I understand that one variable cost. So why didn't we minus 38 rand variable cost? I know we'll get a negative number. I'm saying like
why didn't we include that in our costing?
Yeah.
So you remember?
I know you said to say we're not actually studying this.
Yes.
So we just use savings and we weren't using like we didn't have a second size, so it's not a finished product.
Yes.
So if that's a logical sense, why variable cost?
So remember this. If you look again at our formula here, right? We have actually incorporated that because, sorry? That's the profit, you could say, or the gross profit, you could say, on every unit of our component. Does it make sense now? So we've covered the 38 rand. Okay. So that's a very good question. Okay. So this is why whenever we actually do, sometimes you'll see when they say the formula for break even, we just say fixed cost divided by your marginal income. Yes, because we know variable costs have already been covered. Okay. Right. Good questions. Good questions. Okay, so here you can see it's just reiterating what I explained to say if we produce 3,700 units or more, then yes, let's manufacture. If we produce less than, then let's go buy the component, okay? So that we can avoid that fixed cost and we obviously don't make a loss as a result thereof. So then here, they are saying, determining whether the component should be purchased from an external supplier or manufactured internally if additional labor cannot be recruited. Okay, so basically they're saying, remember this is a component, so it's just a piece or it's a mechanism or it's something that we need to create the final product, right? So now we need to assess, is it profitable for us to make this final product, all right, considering that we now need to pay for labor because we can't recruit it within the company, okay? We're going to need additional labor. So here, we then have to look at, and here in the third part, they actually give us now the selling price of the existing product. So we now need to work that out, or at least get the contribution margin so we can establish the contribution per limiting factor. Our limiting factor in this case is potentially labor, or is labor, okay? So to get the contribution margin, we say, okay, selling price, which we know is 101, right, per unit, minus our variable costs, If you look there, they say direct materials is 11 Rand, right? So we know we're including that. Direct labor is 31 Rand 50. 31.50. And then finally, your variable overhead per unit is 22.50. Okay, so that's going to give you your total variable costs. Yes, yes. And let's then see what that gives us. Okay, I don't actually need this. Or maybe let me just keep it there. Okay, so then you get 36. 36. 36. Okay, so that's our contribution margin, excuse me. Then they told us that direct labor hour per unit, all right? Direct labor hour per unit is how long? What's your direct labor hour per unit? What's the cost? Is what? 3.50. Okay, so we must pay 3.50 for 9 hours. Okay, so here remember, what are we calculating? We're calculating ultimately we are trying to calculate the contribution per limiting factor, isn't it? So the limiting factor is direct labor, okay? And here they're saying per unit it takes how long? How many direct labor hours? 9, okay? So we're saying per unit we've got 9 hours of this limiting factor, all right? So we then say, okay, what is the contribution? What is the contribution per limiting factor or per direct labor hour? So you've got your 36 divided by 9, and that's obviously giving you this 4 Rand here. Okay. So then we can now go to the component and then evaluate to see variable cost per unit of the component is 38. Now, what is the loss in contribution? What is the loss in contribution? I think they might have alluded to something here in the question, didn't they?
What are we supposed to do to get the loss contribution?
That is the relevant question. Contribution per. Oh. So remember, it means that we basically will not be producing the component, right? So if we're not producing the component, right, that means we won't get this 4 Rand contribution, right? So we know that it takes 5 labor hours for the component. If you go back to the table, you'll see there, direct labor 5 hours, all right, at 2.50 Rand. Okay, so here we're saying now 5 hours, and then we're saying times our contribution that we get from the actual product. This is why we had to calculate this, which is 4 Rand. Okay, so that's what we're losing if we say we're not going to produce this component. Can you see that? Okay, so then we say, okay, sure. That is obviously going to give us 20 Rand. Okay, so now the total relevant cost is then going to be 58. All right, as a result of labor increasing. All right, or us being unable to in-source the labor, having to go externally. So now the total relevant cost to produce the component is 58, but our supplier still guaranteed us at 55. So are we making a profit or a loss in producing this or continuing to manufacture the component? It's a loss of 3 Rand. Okay, so then obviously we are not going to actually produce it or manufacture it. We are going to have to purchase it. Okay, because it's cheaper. We will save 3 Rand if we purchase it. Again, that's under the condition that, as they highlighted there, assuming additional labor cannot be recruited and any labor released will be employed in increasing production of existing product. Okay, so just be mindful of that.
The whole process, like, obviously you say we're trying to get the limiting factor, which was labor, right?
Yes.
So in the case like this, the process is going, like, getting the contribution margin per unit.
Per unit.
And then, why did we use the 5 hours, not the 9 hours?
Because remember here, we're comparing the component, the cost to manufacture of the component versus the cost to manufacture of the no, not the whole unit, of the the cost to manufacture of the component, right? And then the cost to buy the component, right? So here we're then saying, okay, we know that if we do not produce this, we're going to be, we need 5 hours, all right, in order to actually produce the component. So we know that, oh, that's not a problem, but we're going to lose out on this 4 Rand coming from the product. Okay, so that's where the issue is if we don't produce it ourselves. So we need to, it's like we need to account for the opportunity cost. Does that make sense? Right. We need to account for the opportunity cost. And you're going to see this in 5.3. There's also a loss of contribution of some sort. So we're basically saying if we don't go with a certain alternative, we need to account for also any benefits that we will forego as a result of picking the other option. Does that make sense? Okay. But I think it's one of those that you just need to, we need to sit with, go through the question again, see the key information that's been provided, and then you should be good. Okay, but let me quickly just jot down that we've used this one. I want us to just do 5.3 as well. So this is okay. So here they bombard you with quite a lot of information on this one, but it's not that bad. Not that bad. And maybe we might not finish it before the break, but that's fine. So with 5.3, under the required, let's see, they're saying calculate whether the company should sell division P. So now they've changed. Before, we've looked at should we produce a product or not produce a product, right? We've looked at should we produce a component or not produce a component. And now we're looking at should we sell a whole division or should we keep the division? Okay. And again, obviously showing you the relevance of relevant cost. Okay. And all of it is just to say, is it more profitable to keep this business activity or to forego it? All right, or look at another alternative. Okay. So that's the first thing they want. Then they say consider other factors that may influence the decision. Okay, that's just theory. So guys, make sure to know your theory. They seem to be asking a little more of that these days. And then calculate the percentage increase in sales required in 2003, let's just call it 2003, for the financial viability of both alternatives to be the same. To be the same. In other words, we don't lose out on either or. So let's get cracking. Let's see what else they're saying here. Ding Ltd manufactures and sells a wide range of products. The products are manufactured by various divisions and sold in a number of separate markets. The following financial information is provided for the year ended 31 December 2002. Okay. Right. Then it says, so you've got sales. Okay. You've got sales, you've got cost of sales, gross profit, and so on and so forth. Okay. What is important to note is this is the financial information of the company. I don't think they make it loud and clear, but this is the information of the company, not necessarily the division. Okay. Then it goes on. An offer has been received to purchase division P, which has been performing poorly over the past few years. The following information relates to division P. Gross profit percentage on sales is 40% of that earned by the group. Okay, so again, we're going to use, this is the group's financials, and we're going to use that to figure out what's happening with division P. Total sales amounts to 12% of group sales. Manufacturing fixed overheads or overhead of 350 are included in the cost of sales. Then other expenses, non-manufacturing, of 180,000 are all fixed and includes a general overhead allocation of 42,000, which are not affected by the discontinuation decision. So what are they telling us about that 42,000? It's saying it's not affected by whether we sell or keep this division. What are they basically telling us about the general overhead allocation of 42,000? We must subtract from what? You're saying we must subtract from what? From 180, she says. From 180. So I'm not thinking too much about what we're going to do exactly to it, whether subtract or add or at this point. But what we do know is that if something is a cost that you are going to experience regardless of the outcome, what do we call that type of cost? Oh, wow, I can see why you're saying that. Yes, fair. But here we're talking specifically to decisions. So regardless of whether you come to school or not, whether you use your car or not, you're going to pay. Okay, I'm struggling now to find a good example. But the whole point is that I wanted to say it's a sunk cost. It's an irrelevant cost. Does that make sense? So we're not going to use that 42 in our decision making, because either way we're going to incur that 42,000, whether we have division P or we don't have it. So that's why they're telling us that irrespective of whether we continue or discontinue this division, that 42 is something we're going to incur. So it has no influence on what? Our decision. Does that make sense? So we know that we refer to that as a sunk cost. Okay, there's no way of avoiding it. Okay, right. Then it goes on to say, if the division is not sold, fixed costs will increase by 6%. Variable costs remain the same percentage of sales. Sales are expected to increase by 11%. Okay. If the division is sold, it is expected that some sales of other divisions would be lost. Okay, so here can you see, this is the opportunity cost that I was telling you, or the lost contribution, because they're saying that some sales of other divisions would be lost, amounting to a contribution of 25,000. Okay, so I just thought I'd mention that now. Sales proceeds on the sale of a division would be invested to yield a return of 80,000. So whatever we sell this division for, we would invest it and we would get 80,000. All right, a return of 80,000. So we then also need to, when weighing up whether we sell or keep, we need to say, if we keep, we are foregoing the 80,000. Does that make sense? So if we decide to keep, we need to make sure that we earn more than 80,000 to justify keeping division P. Does that make sense? And whatever other maybe additional income we would have realized as a result of selling division P. Okay, so that is the information in the question. So first things first, they said calculate whether the company should sell division P. So what now must happen? So here, first and foremost, we need to find out what is our gross profit, okay, which is the same as saying what is our marginal income of this division. Okay, so they don't tell us our variable costs. Did you see that? Nowhere did they make mention of such things. Okay, so now this is where we now need to begin to use the information that the following information relates to division P. So the first thing they told us is that your gross profit percentage on sales is 40% of the group's. So we don't know the group's gross profit percentage, isn't it? But we do know what gross profit percentage is. It is what? It is 30%. No. Is it 40%? The groups. They are saying 40% of of that earned by the group. Can you see that? They're basically telling you that division P's gross profit percentage is 40% of the group's gross profit percentage. Yeah, the wording here was something else. I had to look at it also several times. Like, wait, what did they say? Okay. So here, again, they didn't give us the gross profit percentage, but we know gross profit. What's the formula for gross profit percentage? It's your gross profit divided by 100%. Okay. So here we do have our sales, we do have our gross profit. So our gross profit is 3.5 million, isn't it? Yes.
But yours says division P. Actually, I think you should put.
Because I'm still calculating it, isn't it? We're still calculating. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Okay. So 3.5. How many zeros did I put here? Okay, one more. Okay, divided by our sales of 9,250,000. Okay, is that 3 zeros? Yes. Okay, so within this we have your gross profit percentage, isn't? So maybe let's actually just get that. Okay, obviously times 100 to put it into percentage. But then we can quickly just say times your 40%. Okay, let me space it out a little bit, and then times 0.40. And what do we get? Okay. Yes, so this is 15.14%. Okay, right. We've got that. Let's see. Now, we then say, remember our objective is to find out our contribution from division P. Now we then say, what was our sales for division P? They told us 12% of the group sales. So our group sales was the 9, let me just copy and paste this, the 9,250,000 times 12%, 0.12. Okay, so that is our sales for division P. I think that's 1,110,000. Is that correct? Okay. Now we can work out our gross profit. And our gross profit, obviously I think I did, still have it there. And times this, yes, 0.1514. Okay, so you get now this 168,000, okay, 54 Rand, okay. But you see something interesting. On the third bullet point, they said manufacturing fixed overheads of 350 are included in the cost of sales. Okay, so we remember to calculate cost of sales, we're saying sales, or sorry, to calculate gross profit, we're saying sales minus your cost of sales to get your gross profit. So we never looked at how much our cost of sales was. We just, off of the gross profit percentage, we obviously worked out what our gross profit is from our sales, isn't it? That's what we did. But they're telling us that in this, there is a 350,000 that is fixed overhead. Can you see that? So we know when we're talking about contribution, it must be exclusive of fixed costs. We're just talking about variable costs. So what do we need to do with the 350? And there you can see it on the board. We need to add it back to get our contribution for division P. Is it making sense? Okay, so here again you can see I'm pretty much just explaining the same thing. Total revenue or sales less your cost of sales, which includes that fixed overhead, has given us our gross profit. And we know that contribution is your selling price minus your variable costs. So we obviously are adding back that fixed overhead. Okay. So then the next step would then be to calculate, yes, it's coming from here. It's the gross profit that we calculated. Oh, you know what? I think in your textbooks, maybe they didn't use the 14. So let's just see what is 15%. of 0.15 times this
166,500.
166. Oh, so it's still different. Yeah, but it's
rounded to a whole number, so.
it's rounded to a whole number. Did they say that at the beginning of the question?
No, I think they rounded to one.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a rounding issue. It's definitely a rounding issue. I don't know what decimals they work to or what. But yeah, in your textbooks, this is what they have. So it's just a rounding issue. And also here, if you check, also here, we were also working with 4 decimals here as well. So even in our, maybe in our build-up, it could be, But one thing we know for certain is we're on the right track, because this is clearly just difference of rands. Okay, happiness. Thank you for asking that. So the next step now, we have that, okay? But remember, we need to find out if division P is going to be more profitable to keep than to sell, okay? But I can see we're already 2 minutes to the break, so I think we can just pause here, and then when we come back from the break, we'll continue. And once we finish off with 5.2, we'll then get into learning unit 6 and what we'll do between now and our test 2. No, it's not. No, it's not.